$300, enough to save 20 families from starvation, vanishes from a church altar. The thief, the most dangerous outlaw in 3 counties, a man with 12 deaths on his conscience and a bounty that could buy a ranch. The town wants blood. The sheriff's forming a posse. Guns are being loaded. But the pastor, he does something absolutely insane. Something that will either get him killed or change everything. What happens next will leave you speechless. The wind that Christmas Eve didn't just blow through Redemption Creek, it attacked it. The kind of cold that turned spit to ice before it hit the ground. The kind that made strong men question whether they'd see spring. Inside the First Methodist Church, oil lamps flickered against the darkness as Pastor Ezekiel Brennan stood at the pulpit, watching his congregation sing the final hymn. But he wasn't hearing the music. His eyes kept drifting to the simple wooden box on the altar table. The donation box they'd been filling for 3 months. 67 families in Redemption Creek. 42 of them wouldn't make it through winter without help. Ezekiel had watched Jessie Kellerman, a widow with 4 children, drop in 2 pennies, probably her last 2 pennies. He'd seen Jacob Thornton, the blacksmith, contribute a silver dollar even though everyone knew the bank was threatening to take his shop. Old Temperance Harlow had given a gold wedding ring, her voice cracking as she said, "My Thomas would want it to feed the children." $300, enough for medicine, enough for food, enough for heating coal, enough for hope. The hymn ended. The congregation filed out, shaking Ezekiel's hand, their faces worn but peaceful. Christmas Eve had that effect. One night where the brutal West seemed a little less brutal. Deacon Silas Weatherby was the last to leave, lingering as he always did to help snuff the lamps. "Beautiful service, Pastor. Tomorrow we'll distribute the funds. Should we start with the Harlow place? That consumption is getting worse." "Yes," Ezekiel nodded, already mentally calculating portions. "We'll visit every family, make sure no one's forgotten." He stopped mid-sentence. The donation box sat on the altar table, exactly where it should be. Except now the lid was open, and inside, nothing, not a single coin. Ezekiel's legs moved before his mind caught up, carrying him to the altar in 4 long strides. He grabbed the box, tilted it toward the lamplight as if the money might somehow be hiding. His hands plunged inside, feeling every corner, every edge, empty, completely empty. "No!" The word came out as a whisper. "No, no, no." "Pastor?" Silas's boots echoed on the wooden floor as he approached. "What's wrong?" Ezekiel couldn't speak. He could only stare at the empty box, his mind racing through impossible calculations. Without this money, the Kellerman children would be on the orphan train by February. Temperance Harlow would be dead by March. The Thornton family would lose everything. "Sweet mercy," Silas breathed, looking into the empty box. Then his face hardened, transforming from deacon to the cavalry sergeant he'd been 15 years ago. "Somebody robbed the church on Christmas Eve." His hand went to his hip, fingers wrapping around the grip of his Colt. "I'll wake Sheriff McCready. We'll form a posse, track whoever did this." "Wait!" Ezekiel's voice was steady now, but something in his chest felt like it was cracking. "Look at the door." The church's front door stood slightly ajar, moving with the wind, and caught on the iron latch, fluttering like a trapped bird, was a small piece of torn fabric, crimson red, bright as blood. Silas crossed to it, yanked the fabric free, and held it up to the lamplight. His face went pale. No, it can't be. But they both knew. In 3 counties, only 1 man wore that shade of red, dyed special in San Francisco, expensive as sin, distinctive as a signature. Kane Dockery. The name hung in the air like gun smoke. Kane Dockery, the outlaw who'd robbed 17 stagecoaches in 2 years. Kane Dockery, who'd killed a deputy in Silver Bend and shot a merchant in Copper Falls who'd tried to stop him. Kane Dockery, whose face adorned wanted posters from here to the Utah territory, with a bounty of $500, dead or alive. Kane Dockery had just robbed their church. "I'm getting the sheriff," Silas said, already moving toward the door. "We'll have 20 armed men in 10 minutes. The snow's fresh, we can track him easy. He won't get away with this, Pastor. Not this time." "Silas, wait!" But the deacon was already gone, the door slamming behind him, leaving Ezekiel alone in the church with empty pews and an empty box and the crushing weight of 42 families depending on money that was gone. He should have been angry. He should have been demanding justice, calling for the rope, joining the posse himself. Instead, he found himself staring at that scrap of crimson fabric. Why would Kane Dockery rob a church? The man had robbed army payrolls, stagecoaches carrying mine payouts, even a railroad office. He went after big scores, dangerous targets that made his legend grow. A church donation box, $300. That was nothing to a man like Dockery, unless it wasn't about the money at all. Ezekiel walked to the door, pushed it fully open, and stepped into the brutal cold. The wind hit him like a physical blow, but he barely noticed. His eyes were on the ground, on the fresh snow that had started falling an hour before the service ended. There. Footprints. Boot prints leading from the church door, stumbling, uneven, and next to them, every few feet. Dark spots in the white snow. Blood. Not much, just drops, but enough. The prints led north, toward the hitching posts where Ezekiel's horse waited. Samson, his copper-coated Morgan stallion, the finest horse in the county, worth more than the church's annual budget. The horse had been a gift from a grateful rancher whose daughter Ezekiel had pulled from a flooded creek 5 years ago. Samson stamped his hooves, breath steaming in the frozen air, sensing Ezekiel's agitation. "Easy, boy," Ezekiel murmured, running a hand along the horse's powerful neck. "Easy now." In the distance, he could hear Silas shouting, rousing the town. Doors were opening. Men were emerging with rifles and shotguns, their faces hard with frontier justice. Sheriff McCready's voice boomed across the square. "Form up. We ride in 5 minutes." Kane Dockery was injured, desperate, probably dying somewhere in the frozen wilderness. The posse would catch him within hours, and when they did, there'd be a rope or a bullet waiting. Justice would be served. But Ezekiel kept staring at those blood drops in the snow, kept thinking about that torn fabric, kept hearing his own sermon from an hour ago, echoing in his head. "For unto you is born this day a Savior, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Goodwill toward men, all men, even thieves, even killers, even a man like Kane Dockery." "Pastor!" Silas was running toward him, a dozen armed men behind him. "We've got the trail. Heads north toward Widow's Canyon. We'll have him by dawn." Widow's Canyon. A death trap of red rock mazes where outlaws disappeared and lawmen died. If Dockery made it deep enough into those canyons before the posse caught him, the pursuit would turn into a bloodbath. Ezekiel looked at Samson. At the posse, at the church behind him with its empty donation box, at the town full of families who were counting on him. And then, he did something that would be talked about for the next 50 years. He swung himself onto Samson's back. "Pastor, what are you doing?" Silas grabbed Samson's bridle. "You can't ride with us. You're not armed. You're not—" "I'm not riding with you," Ezekiel said quietly. "I'm riding ahead of you." "What?" "Pastor, that's insane. Dockery will kill you on sight." "Maybe." Ezekiel gathered the reins. "Or maybe there's another way this ends." "Another way?" "He robbed a church on Christmas Eve. He stole money meant for widows and orphans." "I know what he stole, Silas." Ezekiel's voice was steady, but his heart was hammering. "And I know what I'm about to do might be the stupidest decision I've ever made." But I also know this. If we hunt that man down like an animal, we become no better than he is. And this town, this congregation, deserves better than that." He looked at the confused, angry faces surrounding him. Good men. Righteous men. Men ready to deliver justice with powder and lead. "I'm going to find Cain Dockery," Ezekiel said, "and I'm going to make him an offer. If I'm not back by sunrise, then you ride. But give me this one chance. Give mercy one chance before we choose vengeance." "Mercy?" Silas's voice cracked. "Pastor, that man doesn't deserve—" "None of us deserve it," Ezekiel interrupted gently. "That's what makes it mercy." And before anyone could stop him, before he could second-guess the insane thing he was about to do, Ezekiel Brennan kicked Samson into a gallop and rode into the frozen darkness, following the blood trail of the most dangerous outlaw in 3 counties. Behind him, the posse stood in stunned silence. "Is he really going to?" someone asked. "Yes," Silas said, watching the pastor disappear into the night. "God help him, he really is." What none of them knew, what Ezekiel himself didn't know, was that the decision made in that moment would change not just one life, but an entire town, and the legend that would grow from this Christmas Eve would be told around campfires and dinner tables for generations. But first, a pastor and an outlaw had to meet in a frozen canyon, and one of them had to survive. Ezekiel Brennan was either about to perform a miracle or become the stupidest dead pastor in Wyoming history. Because here's what you need to understand. Cain Dockery hadn't just killed men. He'd made them examples. The deputy in Silver Bend. They found him tied to a tree with his own badge pinned through his chest. The merchant in Copper Falls, shot in broad daylight for reaching for a hidden shotgun. And now, Ezekiel was riding alone, unarmed, into the darkness to face him, with an offer that would either save a soul or get him killed in the next 10 minutes. The cold was a living thing now, clawing at Ezekiel's face, seeping through his wool coat, like water through cheesecloth. Samson's hooves pounded the frozen ground in a rhythm that matched Ezekiel's hammering heart. "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" The blood trail was easy to follow. Too easy. Every 100 yards, another dark stain in the snow. More frequent now, larger pools. Whoever Cain Dockery had been when he'd broken into that church, he was weaker now. Dying, maybe. Good, part of Ezekiel's mind whispered. Let him die. Save everyone the trouble. He pushed the thought away, but it came back stronger. He's a killer. He's stolen from widows and orphans. On Christmas Eve, why are you doing this? Ezekiel didn't have a good answer, just a conviction burning in his chest that felt like either the voice of God or complete madness. On the frontier, those two things often felt identical. The terrain began to change. The flat plains gave way to rising red rock formations, jagged and threatening against the star-filled sky. Widow's Canyon. The name alone made hardened men nervous, a labyrinth of stone where sound echoed strangely, where a man could be 10 feet away, or 100 yards, where ambush was as easy as breathing. 3 separate posses had entered this canyon in the last 5 years. Only one had come out whole. Samson whinnied nervously, ears flicking back. "I know, boy," Ezekiel murmured. "I don't like it either." The blood trail led deeper into the canyon, winding between towering walls of stone that blocked out the moonlight. Darkness closed in like a fist. Ezekiel had to dismount, leading Samson carefully over treacherous ground, following the blood by feel as much as sight. Then, a sound, the metallic click of a hammer being pulled back. Ezekiel froze. "That's far enough, preacher." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the canyon walls. Rough, pain-edged, but steady. You're either the bravest man I've ever seen, or the dumbest. Haven't decided which. I'm unarmed, Ezekiel called out, raising his hands slowly. I just want to talk. Talk? A harsh laugh echoed through the darkness. You rode into Widow's Canyon at night to talk. You must think I'm simple-minded. I think you're injured. I think you're desperate. And I think you didn't rob that church because you wanted to. Silence. Long enough that Ezekiel wondered if he'd guessed wrong. If Dockery had moved position. If a bullet was about to end this conversation permanently. Then, show yourself. Slow. Hands where I can see them. Ezekiel moved forward, leading Samson around a bend in the canyon. The walls opened into a shallow cave, barely deep enough to be called a shelter. And there, backlit by the pathetic flames of a failing fire, sat Cain Dockery. The wanted posters didn't do him justice. They showed a hard man with cold eyes and a scarred face. But they didn't show the intelligence in those eyes, the way they calculated every angle, every option, every threat. They didn't show the pain either. The way his left hand pressed against his side, the way his coat hung open to reveal a shirt soaked black with blood. His revolver was steady, though, pointed directly at Ezekiel's chest. From this distance, maybe 8 feet, even a dying man couldn't miss. "Nice horse," Dockery said, his gaze flicking to Samson. "Morgan stallion, copper coat. Worth what, 400? 500, Ezekiel said quietly. "His name is Samson. Biblical, fitting for a preacher." Dockery's eyes narrowed. "Now explain to me why you're here before I put a bullet through that collar." This was it. The moment that would determine everything. Ezekiel could see the scattered money around the cave. $20 bills, smaller notes, even some coins. The donation box lay on its side near the fire, empty. The sight of it should have made him angry. Instead, he just felt sad. "You're not here for the money," Ezekiel said. Dockery's gun hand didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's so. You've robbed stagecoaches carrying thousands, army payrolls, mine shipments. Why would you risk entering a town, breaking into a church for $300? Ezekiel took a careful step closer. "Unless you didn't know it was only 300. Unless you thought a church on Christmas Eve might be holding something bigger. Or unless..." He looked at the blood-soaked shirt, at the way Dockery's breathing was shallow and quick. "Unless you were already dying and just needed enough to pay a doctor who wouldn't ask questions." Dockery's jaw clenched. For a moment, Ezekiel thought he'd pushed too far, that the gun would bark and everything would end. Then Dockery laughed, a wet, painful sound that turned into a cough. He spat blood onto the cave floor. "Smart man," he said when he could speak again. "Got shot 3 days ago in a card game gone bad in Silver Bend. Player thought I was cheating. He was right, but that's beside the point. Bullet's still in there, somewhere around my ribs. Been bleeding on and off ever since." He gestured weakly at the scattered money. "Saw the church, saw all those people filing in. Thought maybe on Christmas Eve there'd be enough for a doctor and a horse to get me out of the territory. Didn't realize until I got here that it was just that." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Widow money, orphan money, the kind even a man like me thinks twice about taking. But you took it anyway," Ezekiel said gently. "Yeah." Dockery's gun lowered slightly, just an inch. "I took it anyway, because dying men don't get to be choosy about their morals. And now you're here to what? Drag me back, watch the posse string me up, or did you want the honor of killing me yourself?" "No," Ezekiel said. "I came to make you an offer." Dockery stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. "An offer. That wound needs tending, properly, by someone who knows what they're doing. You need food, rest, and distance from this territory. Every lawman within 50 miles is looking for you right now. By dawn, there'll be 100 armed men tracking this blood trail. I'm aware, Dockery said dryly. Hence the cave and the gun pointed at your chest. Now get to this offer before I lose patience. Ezekiel took a deep breath. This was insane. Every rational part of his mind was screaming at him to stop, to turn around, to let justice take its course. But he thought about Christmas Eve, about peace on earth, about goodwill toward men, all men, even the ones who didn't deserve it, especially the ones who didn't deserve it. Take Samson, he said. Dockery blinked. What? Take my horse. He's the finest in the county. Strong, fast, loyal. He'll get you to Pinewood Station in 2 days if you ride smart. There's a doctor there named Marcus Webb. Tell him Ezekiel Brennan sent you. He won't ask questions. The gun had lowered completely now. Dockery was staring at him like he was seeing a ghost. You're giving me your horse? Yes. Your $500 horse? Yes. And safe passage, no pursuit? Yes. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Dockery's face had gone pale. And not just from blood loss. Why would you do that? I robbed your church. I stole from people who need that money to survive. I'm a killer, preacher. I've done things that would make you sick. Why in God's name would you give me mercy? Ezekiel met his eyes steadily. Because I took an oath when I became a pastor, to offer grace to anyone who needs it. And, Mr. Dockery, you look like a man who needs it very badly right now. Grace! Dockery's laugh was bitter. I stopped believing in grace 12 years ago, when my family starved and God did nothing. When my daughter died in my arms and every prayer I said went unanswered. When I realized the only law that matters is the law of the gun. I'm sorry, Ezekiel said, and meant it. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry for your loss. But that doesn't change the offer. Take the horse. Ride north. Get that wound treated. Start over somewhere else. And the money? Dockery gestured at the scattered bills. What about that? Leave it. I'll return it to the church. That's simple. That's simple. For a long moment, neither man moved. The fire crackled. Wind howled through the canyon. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the frozen night. Finally, Dockery lowered his gun completely, letting it rest on his lap. You know what happens if word gets out that you let me go, that you gave me your own horse. They'll run you out of that town, might even hang you themselves for aiding an outlaw. Maybe, Ezekiel admitted, but that's my burden to carry, not yours. You're insane. Probably. This is a trick. Has to be. You've got men waiting outside the canyon. This is all just to get me to lower my guard. No trick, Ezekiel said. Just an offer. Take it or leave it. Dockery studied him for what felt like an eternity, looking for the lie, the trap, the angle. Ezekiel could see the calculation happening behind those hard eyes, the desperate mathematics of a dying man trying to find the catch in an offer too good to be true. I don't understand you, Dockery finally said. You don't have to understand, Ezekiel replied. You just have to choose. Bleed out in this cave, waiting for a posse that will show you no mercy. Or take the mercy I'm offering right now. Another long silence. Then, slowly, painfully, Kane Dockery holstered his gun. All right, preacher, he said, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to hide. I'll take your devil's bargain, but answer me one thing first. What? How do you know I won't just take the horse, keep the money, and shoot you the moment you turn your back? Ezekiel smiled sadly. I don't. But if you do, that's between you and God. I've made my choice. He walked to Samson, ran his hand along the horse's powerful neck one last time, feeling the muscles shift beneath copper coat. This horse had been his companion for 5 years, his transportation, his friend, his pride. Now he was a gift to the most dangerous outlaw in 3 counties. "Samson's loyal," Ezekiel said, gathering the scattered money and placing it back in the donation box. "But he'll follow whoever holds his reins. There's food in the saddle bag. Dried beef, hardtack, enough for 3 days. There's also a blanket and a canteen." He turned to face Dockery, holding out Samson's reins. "Webb's practice is on 3rd Street in Pinewood Station. He'll fix you up. After that, you're free. The man you were ends in this canyon. What you become next is your choice." Dockery stood slowly, every movement clearly painful. He took the reins with a shaking hand. "I've killed 12 men," he said quietly. "Robbed more people than I can count. Spread fear and pain wherever I went. You really think a man like me can just start over?" "I think grace is stronger than the past," Ezekiel said. "But you'll have to find that out for yourself." He picked up the donation box, now full again, and turned toward the cave entrance. "Pastor," Dockery's voice stopped him. "If I do this, if I actually ride north, get fixed up, try to be someone different, what's to stop me from coming back, from being the same man I always was?" Ezekiel looked back over his shoulder. "Nothing. Nothing at all. That's the terrifying thing about grace, Mr. Dockery. It's a gift, not a contract. What you do with it is entirely up to you." And with that, he walked out of the cave and into the frozen darkness, leaving behind his horse, his pride, and a very confused outlaw. The walk back to Redemption Creek would take hours. The cold would be brutal. The posse would probably think he'd lost his mind. But as Ezekiel trudged through the snow, clutching the donation box to his chest, he felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. Behind him, in the cave, Cain Dockery stared at the reins in his hand and the magnificent horse before him. He had a choice to make, and for the first time in 12 years, he had no idea what to do. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for the miracle to happen. 3 weeks of Ezekiel walking through town without his prized horse. 3 weeks of whispers, of doubt, of people wondering if their pastor had lost his mind. 3 weeks of struggling families sharing what little they had, of wondering if mercy had been a mistake. And then, on a gray January morning, something impossible happened. Something that would become the most told story in Wyoming history. The morning came in cold and colorless. The kind of January day that made you forget the sun had ever existed. Ezekiel was in the church on his knees, scrubbing the wooden floor, a task he'd assigned himself as penance, though for what sin he wasn't entirely sure. Pride maybe, or foolishness, or the nagging doubt that maybe he'd been wrong, that maybe mercy had just been another word for stupidity. The $300 had been distributed as planned. The Kellerman children had food. Temperance Harlow had her medicine. The Thornton family kept their shop, but it was tight. So tight that they'd all agreed to cut portions, to share more, to make every dollar stretch like taffy. And every time someone thanked him, Ezekiel saw the question in their eyes. Was it worth it? Was saving one outlaw's life worth the risk? He didn't have an answer. Wouldn't have one, maybe. Until the day he died, the church door burst open. "Pastor!" Silas Weatherby stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes wide. Behind him a crowd was forming, 10 people, 20, 30, spilling out into the street. "Silas!" Ezekiel stood, his knees cracking, water dripping from his brush. "What's wrong?" "You need to come outside." Silas's voice was shaking. "Right now, you need to see this." The tone made Ezekiel's heart drop. Had something happened? Had Dockery come back? Had the law finally caught up with him and connected Ezekiel to the escape? He dropped the brush and walked quickly to the door. pushing through the growing crowd. People were pointing, murmuring, some with hands over their mouths, others with tears streaming down their faces. And there, standing at the hitching post in front of the church, was Samson. Ezekiel's legs almost gave out. The copper-coated Morgan stallion stood proud and strong, breath steaming in the cold air, looking for all the world like he'd just been out for a pleasant morning ride. His coat gleamed, his eyes were bright and alert, and tied to his saddle. "Dear God," Ezekiel whispered. 2 bulging leather saddlebags hung from the saddle, so heavy they made the leather creak, but it was what was between them that made Ezekiel's hands start to shake. A folded piece of paper, secured with a leather cord, with Pastor Brennan written on it in crude letters. The crowd pressed closer. Ezekiel heard Jesse Kellerman's voice. Is that your horse? Is that Samson?" "It can't be," someone else said. "The pastor gave him to that outlaw." "It is him. Look at that copper coat. There's no other horse like that in 3 counties. Ezekiel moved forward slowly, like he was approaching something from a dream that might disappear if he moved too fast. Samson nickered softly and nuzzled his shoulder, the same greeting the horse had given him every morning for 5 years. "Hey, boy," Ezekiel breathed, running his hand along that familiar neck. "Hey there, you came back." With trembling fingers, he untied the note and unfolded it. The paper was rough, torn from a newspaper. The handwriting was unpracticed, letters formed carefully by someone unused to writing, and the words made something crack open in Ezekiel's chest. He read aloud, his voice breaking. "Pastor Brennan, I rode 3 days north like you said. The horse, Samson, he saved my life. Strong and steady even when I was barely conscious. Led me straight to Pinewood Station, like he knew the way himself. Dr. Webb fixed me up, dug out the bullet, stitched me proper, gave me medicine. When I told him you sent me, he wouldn't take payment. Said any friend of yours gets treated free. I didn't know men like that still existed. I've been working at a lumber camp under the name Elijah Stone. Elijah, it means my God is Yahweh. Looked it up, seemed fitting for a man trying to figure out if God might actually be real after all. Every dollar in these bags was earned honest. 12-hour days, 6 days a week, cutting timber until my hands bled. I've never worked this hard for anything in my life, never earned anything clean before. Turns out honest money feels different, weighs different. There's $600 here. Double what I stole. I know it doesn't fix what I did. Doesn't bring back the people I hurt or the years I can't return. But it's a start. You said grace is a gift, not a contract. You were right. I could have kept running, could have taken your horse and disappeared into Montana or California. Could have gone back to being Kane Dockery. But here's what you didn't know, Pastor. I can't outrun what happened in that canyon. I've spent 12 years running from the law, from bounty hunters, from posses and sheriffs and rangers. I could always outride them, always stay 1 step ahead, made me cocky, made me think I was untouchable. But I can't outrun grace. It follows me everywhere now. In the lumber camp, when the foreman trusts me with the pay box. At the boarding house, when the widow gives me extra food without asking for more money. At night, when I lie awake and remember the way you looked at me. Not like I was a monster, but like I was a man who could choose to be something different. That's what grace does, I'm learning. It doesn't let you forget. It doesn't let you go back. It just keeps following you, quiet and steady, until you realize you're not running anymore. I'm not coming back to Redemption Creek. Too many people want me dead, and I won't bring that trouble to your doorstep. But I wanted you to know. The man who stole from your church died in Widow's Canyon. What walks around now is someone different, someone trying. The Bible says something about old things passing away and all things becoming new. I never understood that until now. I'm not new yet. Maybe I never will be completely. But I'm trying. Every single day I'm trying. Thank you for showing me there's another way to live. Thank you for being stupid enough to offer mercy to a man who didn't deserve it. Thank you for giving me a chance when the world would have given me a rope. I hope the money helps your people. I hope it gets those kids through winter. I hope old Temperance gets her medicine. And I hope someday when you tell the story of the outlaw and the pastor, you can say it ended with something good. Elijah Stone, formerly Kane Dockery, P.S. Samson's a good horse, best I ever rode. Treat him right. The silence that followed was absolute. Ezekiel stood there, holding the letter, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the crowd had gone completely still. Some were crying. Others had hands pressed to their mouths. Jessie Kellerman had collapsed to her knees in the snow, sobbing. $600, Silas whispered, finally breaking the silence. He'd opened the saddlebags, his hands shaking as he counted clean bills. It's all here, $600, all of it earned honest. He came back, someone said, voice thick with wonder. The outlaw came back. No, Ezekiel said quietly, folding the letter carefully and pressing it to his chest. The outlaw died. This came from someone new, someone who chose grace over the gun. Old Temperance Harlow pushed through the crowd, her breathing raspy, but her eyes sharp. She placed a weathered hand on Ezekiel's arm. You gave away your finest possession for a thief, Pastor. Ezekiel looked at her, at Samson, at the saddlebags full of honest money, at the letter pressed against his heart. No, ma'am, he said, his voice stronger now. I gave away a horse. What came back was proof that no man is beyond redemption. That's worth more than all the stallions in creation. The crowd erupted. People were hugging, crying, praising God. The church bells started ringing. Silas must have run to pull the rope. The sound echoed across Redemption Creek, calling everyone to come see the miracle. By noon, the entire town had gathered. The $600 was spread across the altar table, and this time it would stretch even further. Medicine for Temperance, food for the Kellermans and 3 other families, new tools for Thornton's blacksmith shop, seed for spring planting, repairs for the church roof, and enough left over to start something new. We should call it the Grace Fund, Silas suggested, standing before the congregation that evening. For anyone who needs a second chance. For anyone who's struggling. For anyone who needs to know that mercy is real. The motion passed unanimously. Ezekiel stood at the pulpit, holding the letter where he could see it. He'd already decided to frame it, to hang it inside the pulpit, where future pastors could read it and remember. I won't pretend I knew how this would end, he told his congregation. When I rode into that canyon, I was terrified. When I gave away Samson, I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. When I walked back through that snow alone, I doubted everything. He paused, looking at the faces before him. Faces that had doubted, that had questioned, that were now shining with something like hope. But here's what I learned. Mercy plants seeds we can't always see. When you offer grace, you don't get to control what grows from it. You don't get guarantees. You don't get certainty. All you get is the choice to do the right thing, even when it's terrifying. He held up the letter. Kane Dockery could have kept running, could have taken this horse and vanished into the frontier, could have gone back to being the man he was. But grace, real, undeserved, freely given grace, it changed something in him. It made him want to be different. And if it worked for him, Ezekiel's voice rose, filling the small church. It can work for anyone. For the drunk who wants to quit. For the husband who wants to stop hurting his family. For the thief, the liar, the cheat. For anyone who thinks they've gone too far, done too much. That redemption isn't possible. He looked at Samson through the window, standing proud at the hitching post. Grace is stronger than any prison, stronger than any chain, stronger than the worst thing you've ever done. Jessie Kellerman stood up, her 4 children beside her. Pastor, I want to tell you something. When you gave away that horse, when you let that outlaw go free, I was angry. I thought you'd betrayed us. I thought you'd chosen him over us. Her voice broke. But I was wrong. You didn't choose him over us. You chose mercy for all of us. And now my children have food, and Temperance has medicine, and we have hope again. Real hope. The kind that says tomorrow might be different than yesterday. One by one, others stood. Thornton the blacksmith, the miners, the widows, the families who'd been on the edge of desperation. You showed us what grace looks like, Thornton said, his voice rough. And it don't look like we thought. It looks like giving away your best horse. It looks like trusting when trust seems stupid. It looks like believing people can change when everyone else has given up. The testimonies continued until the sun set and the oil lamps were lit. Stories of transformation, of hope renewed, of a town that had learned what it meant to choose mercy over vengeance. Spring came to Redemption Creek, like a promise kept. The seed purchased with Elijah Stone's restitution money sprouted green and strong. The church roof was repaired. Temperance Harlow's cough faded as the medicine did its work. The Kellerman children grew taller, healthier, their laughter filling the streets, and the story spread. Travelers passing through would stop at the church asking to see the famous letter, to hear the tale of the pastor and the outlaw. Ezekiel would show them the framed note hanging inside the pulpit, and he'd tell them what happened in Widow's Canyon. Grace changed a man, he'd always finish, but it changed a town too. It changed all of us. Word came occasionally from the north. A quiet man named Elijah Stone, working hard, living honest, helping others. Some said he'd started a school for orphans. Others said he'd joined a church. The details varied, but the essence was always the same. He was different. He'd changed. And on cold winter nights, when families gathered around their fires, parents would tell their children the story. About a pastor who gave away everything, about an outlaw who found redemption, about a horse that carried mercy from one man to another, about grace that couldn't be outrun. The legend grew with each telling, but Ezekiel never embellished. He didn't need to. The truth was miraculous enough. Years later, a young pastor came to Redemption Creek to train under Ezekiel. On his first day, Ezekiel took him to the pulpit and showed him the letter. "Read that every day," Ezekiel said, his hair now gray, his face lined with years of frontier living. "When you're tempted to write someone off, when you think someone's too far gone, when mercy seems foolish and justice seems easier, read that letter and remember, grace is always worth the risk." The young pastor read it carefully, his lips moving with the words. When he finished, he looked at Ezekiel with tears in his eyes. "Did you ever doubt? In that canyon, when you gave away your horse, did you ever think it was a mistake?" Ezekiel smiled, the same smile he'd worn that Christmas Eve so many years ago. Every second, right up until the moment Samson came back. "That's the thing about faith, son. It always feels like a leap. Always feels like you're giving away something precious for nothing in return." He gestured to the window, where a new generation of children played in the street, where the town thrived and grew. But sometimes what you get back is bigger than what you gave. Not always, not every time, but when it happens. His voice trailed off, and they stood together in silence, reading the letter that had changed everything. Outside, Samson, now old and gray himself, grazed peacefully in the church pasture, living out his final years in the place where a miracle had begun. And somewhere in the northern territories, A man named Elijah Stone knelt beside an orphan child and taught her letters. His hands scarred from honest work, his conscience finally clear. He couldn't outrun grace. Thank God he'd stopped trying. The letter still hangs in that church today, yellowed and faded but still legible. Tourists come from miles away to see it, to touch the frame, to hear the story. And every Christmas Eve, without fail, someone in Redemption Creek tells it again. The story of the pastor who gave away everything, the story of the outlaw who became a new man, the story of grace that couldn't be outrun. Because some stories are too powerful to forget. Some miracles need to be remembered, and some lessons about mercy, redemption, and second chances need to be passed down from generation to generation. This was one of them. Stories like this remind us that change is possible, that redemption is real, that grace can transform even the hardest heart. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in second chances again, hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you real historical tales of courage, faith, and transformation that Hollywood doesn't tell. Drop a comment and tell us, have you ever given someone a second chance that changed their life? Or have you been the one who received unexpected mercy? We read every single comment, and smash that like button if you believe in the power of redemption. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change, that grace is always available, that the person you are today doesn't have to be the person you are tomorrow. New videos every week, stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Subscribe now and let's keep these powerful stories alive, because some lessons are too important to forget.